I was sitting down here in the shop the other day, just sanding a random piece that I was working on. And when you sand, it's kind of a little bit like you're mowing your lawn, like especially if you're not a riding lawnmower and you got a big yard to mow. Your mind just kind of wanders with no real direction. And something popped into my head. I should turn the cameras on down here more often. Now, I usually don't because they kind of get in the way and I'm just never happy. I've made attempts, like with the speeder bike. I made attempts to move the camera, do angles, show what I was doing. And without help, it's kind of difficult to do. But I thought maybe I could figure out a way to just sit here and do stuff. And I've had forever a camera sitting right above here for our podcast. So I thought, I got a above camera and I got a straight camera. So I could put a project right here and work on it and talk to you guys about what I'm doing. Now, I like to collect props. I like to make props. And whether I'm making something for my own collection just because I want it, or I'm creating something to cast and sell, or doing a commission, either way, I always start with research. A couple months ago, when I was researching for one of my videos, I just happened to go on the internet and start looking for 3D files. I don't normally use 3D prints for prop making. It's more of a prototype type thing for me. Like I'll have something designed and then I'll make it into a physical thing and then I'll hugely modify it to make it correct. No matter how much money you spend, unless it's a 3D scan of what I want, 9 times out of 10, it's going to need a lot of work, even if I commission the work itself to be done and give them as much information as possible. It still ends up needing my work. So I thought, why don't we just start doing, I do 3D prints. My 3D printer runs all the time. It's not running right now because I got to swap out the filament and I'm kind of lazy today. But I have tons of stuff printed up that I need to finish. And one thing is, I started printing an Endor bomb a little while back. I'd already researched it, obviously, so I had a lot of information. So I also had enough information to be able to scale it properly. So I went out and I did find this file on Thingiverse. It's made by Props 3D Pro on Thingiverse. It's a really good model. It's an accurate model to this piece and, of course, the apron part, but it's not. The way I would like to build this is the way it was made for the movie. And I've noticed over the years when I'm building something, especially like the speeder bike, and I'm trying to rebuild what they made for like Return of the Jedi with the speeder bike, you end up learning and experiencing many of the same challenges the original prop makers experienced in making that thing. When you reproduce a thing that someone else made, you still end up coming in and running up against the same challenges they did. And I always thought that was neat because it kind of gives you an extra understanding about that piece or that item, what that is. And whenever you go back and watch the movie again, you have a whole different lookout or a whole different way of looking and seeing that prop in the movie. And I always thought that was cool. So I printed this. Like I said, this is Props 3D Pro. This is his model. And first thing I did is I printed it. I think it's laying around here somewhere, but I printed it as it was. And as soon as I got it in my hands, I realized I think this is too small. The proportions between here and here are correct, but it was too small in my hand. And I have very good pictures of an actual screen used Endor bunker bomb. So I know a little bit of the ins and outs. I know where this piece came from. I know what this piece is. So then I did the research because I need the dimensions of this piece right here. So I went online and looked to see if I could find this piece used. And I found it on eBay, England. And because this motor housing comes from a demolition hammer that's made by a company in England called Kango. So I found the proper motor housing, and the guy that was selling it, pretty cool guy, because he did something that I really truly appreciate, and that is he had a tape measure and took pictures with a tape measure showing you the size and dimensions of the thing. I don't know why he did it, because it's just a replacement part. It's just a piece to a demolition hammer. He could have just said, this is part number so-and-so. If you need this, this is what it is. He didn't even mention, hey, this is from, this is what they use to make the bunker bomb for Return of the Jedi. He didn't even say that either. But he had a tape measure, and that allowed me to scale this properly. And then I scaled everything up accordingly. So as I was doing all this, I said, hey, you know what? This will be a fun project, because I'm going to finish this as close to the way the original prop was made. So basically, I'm going to recreating the motor housing the way it should be, and then sliding the skirt on a different way, and a few other things changed. This has a floor in it right here. If you can see, all these cutouts have a floor. That's actually not accurate. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like this. So what I ended up doing was going in and slicing this in 3D Builder. And what I did was I went in and sliced off the top, and then sliced this off and put it to the side. Then on the body, on the inside, it tapers. So I sliced off all the taper, and what I ended up with was a piece about like this. And I didn't think about it, but while I was in 3D Builder, what I should have done is copied that piece and then merged it with a second piece, because this gives me the exact proper dimensions of the motor minus the bottom bolt plate that they cut off for the prop. And then I can assemble the three just like this, and that's what I did. So basically what I did is I took it, sliced this off, then sliced off all the bad, and then printed this twice. Should have just merged it so I would have one, but in the future, that's what I'd do if I ever make another one. I am going to build this from start to finish. I'll even go over how I scaled it and what scaling I did with the tape measured pictures, and I could extrapolate the size of this thing. Now, in 3D Builder, I didn't mess with the scaling. The scaling needs to be 123%. So you start out at 100% and then add 23%. So you're actually printing at 123%. And then when I was done printing out, I noticed the photo multiplier. This is a popular prop. It's used a lot in Star Wars. I noticed when I put it on the side of the bomb, my first test bomb, it was a little bit too small. So I went back and printed these at 130%. The whole model itself, all the pieces, all the greeblies and everything came out at 123%. And then the photo multipliers, I printed them at 130%. Now I had that one piece of reference, which was the photographs from that eBay ad, but I had something else. This is the crankcase timing chain gear that's from the Revell Visible Engine kit, and I have that kit. So I have another piece of reference. I have an actual real gear right here. So I was able, after printing these at 123%, I was able to get that gear, and the gear is slightly, just a little bit larger, maybe 2 or 3% larger. And to be honest, that is totally fine for me, because if I wanted to rescale this, I would have to change a few other things also. That little bit of difference, it's next to nothing. It's minuscule. It's not that big of a deal. So I'm going to leave that scaling alone. It's good enough for me. What I really wanted is make sure I got this right and got the hand, the way it feels and looks. I want that proper. So I'm going to start building this right now, and probably over the next couple of days, I'll have a finished, done, and hopefully really good looking prop. My goal is to have someone pick this up and not realize it's 3D printed unless they look on the backside where I haven't sanded or done anything. I'm going to get started right now. Sorry for talking too much before I get started, but I wanted to explain what I was doing. And I might possibly do a set of files tagging the original maker and just saying, basically this is a resizing and reworking of the model, because the rest of the model is actually really good. It's just like anything else. I think most of the time when you create something and design it from a photo or from whatever, without any of the real world knowledge of how big something really was, you always tend to be 5 to 10% too small. That's kind of tends to be the thing. It's happened to me before, and it seems like it also happens in the 3D world when you're creating something digitally. You always seem to fall in that 5 or 10% too small realm. I don't know why, but it does. So anyway, I'm going to glue these pieces together and start reworking this. I have found when you're sanding these type of details inside and what flat razor or flat files or like jeweler's files, small files, these work really good to clean up your 3D prints. I know there's a lot of people out there that like to find a shortcut to clean up and smooth out the layer lines. But I can tell you, in my experience, the resins that you wipe on, they kind of work on certain types of things, but on something with very sharp detail like this, and then also interior space detail, it's just going to look muted, and it's going to take away the sharpness. I actually do everything with files, sandpaper, and a good primer. That's it. And then elbow grease. I know, in my personal opinion, there's no shortcuts. You have to do this stuff. You just have to. So I'm going to sand these just enough to flatten them out and give it a nice surface to adhere to. I want them to fit nice and tight without too much of a gap. I've already sanded these a little bit because I started on this before I thought about doing it. This is kind of more of like a whim, like I'm doing this. This wasn't planned, so I apologize if I come off as a little bit disjointed. I think sometimes when you don't have a plan, you work out a little better anyway. If you don't have a plan, you don't have nothing to stick to, so you can just go any direction you want. So here, all right, I'm going to glue these guys together. All right, that looks good. And that actually, right there, with the lid, with the top just placed on there, this is very, very close to the original scale. There's one difference. There's a plate, or it wasn't even a plate. It's actually part of this motor housing that has 4 ears that stick out, and there's threaded inserts in it because that's how the back of this thing, the guts would go in, and then a plate with a bearing and everything would go on in the back. And this up front, there should be some holes in the side of it also because that's where the electric brushes went in. I'm not going to do the holes. What covers the holes up on the original are the diodes, the plates from the photo multiplier diode. This is what covers them up. Now, you can actually find these diodes today. They'll run you about $100 a piece. So it's kind of expensive to buy a thing and then break the glass open and start snipping these out. And these are, for the most part, very accurate to the originals. I think these are printed. I think there's a left and a right. There's a little bit of a difference on them. They're mirroring each other, which I don't think they're supposed to do that. I think actually what they do is these holes, there are pieces that would go down through. So it would be a continuous, like this hole here should match this hole here. They wouldn't be like this. Well, actually, you know what? The holes match up if you turn them upside down, but the louvers are different directions. So this is a left and a right. If I go back, I can look and see which is more accurate, whether it's the left or the right. To be honest, for this project, it probably doesn't matter, but I'm thinking from what I'm looking at, I think this one here is the more accurate one with the holes on the left side. But before I glue this on, there is a lot of cleanup I need to do with the files. So I'm going to file and try to get as many of these layer lines cleaned up before I glue it all together and prime it. So I'm just going to go ahead. Oh, and by the way, my printer is not that bad. It's actually a pretty decent printer. I had some electrical issues. There was the power kept flickering that day, and so I had 1, 2, 3 times when the power flickered and the printer went into standby mode and asked to resume the print. So you get these three spots here where the power had failed just for a moment, flickered and came back on. You can see where the print restarted, so it's not that bad. My printer's much better than that. All right, so I'm going to sand this or file these and probably go over it with a little bit of sandpaper while I can still reach these areas real good. And then we'll come back and I'll glue this together and we'll start talking about cleaning other things up and priming. All right, so I've done all the interior areas. I didn't do any much outside because I want to sand the outside. Basically, I want to sand all three of these pieces together so they'll be uniform. I don't want to take too much off and have it not fit properly, so I'm going to go ahead and glue this all together. Now, I try to be as efficient as possible, and being efficient also, I tend to only carry, like when I'm doing a project like this and projects in my shop, I only use 3 types of sandpaper. There's a lot of people that like 220. I really don't care much for 220. It's not aggressive enough. I prefer 180, and there's a lot of people that prefer like 400 over 320, and there are benefits for 400, but if you're getting into the 400, and the reason why you need 400 is in most instances, 320 and 400 are kind of almost like a finish sandpaper before you would paint something. But if you're painting something silver or painting something black, 400 is not going to cut it. But if you're painting something red or tan or blue, most of the time, 320 is going to do just fine. When you need something that's a little bit finer, or colors like black and silver and things like that, gold, it'll show scratches more. So you would want to go 500 and up, maybe as high as 600. And sometimes some paints will not perform as well as others and will show 320 scratches. But for the most part, when I'm doing a project and when we work down here in the shop, we only use 80, 180, and 320. But if we go more aggressive, we have 40 grit down here also. For the finer stuff, we have an assortment of finer sandpapers because we do polishing stuff, so you need to go up into the thousands. So I do go from 500 all the way to 3,000. But for the most part, your workhorse papers are 320, 180, and 80. And that's all you really need, especially on a project like this. All right. Now, that's all glued together. What I'm going to do is, this thing's got these horrible lines due to the electric outlet, the electricity failing. Now, it wasn't bad. It was just a flicker. So I got a file. You don't have to use a file. You can also use a paint stick or even a sanding block. All three of these are fine, but you want to have something. You don't want to hand sand it. You want all these to be sanded in together at the same rate. So you want to use a block of some sort to make sure when we're done, you won't see any of these seam lines. And you also want to clean everything up uniformly. You don't want dips and whatever in it. The file works pretty good to like strip off the bigger stuff. And if you don't have a file, it doesn't matter. You can just go ahead and do it with, like I said, the more basic paint stick, sandpaper on a paint stick. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sand all this smooth, try to get as many layer lines off this as possible. And I'll probably finish this down. I did all this stuff with the file and 180. I might go back over everything lightly with 320 before we prime it to save a little bit of time and energy. I'm going to sand this thing around. I'm going to grab my block and sand this thing, get it all cleaned up. So I'll be back when that's all done. All right, I am finishing up with just a light going over with 180. I used 80 to rough it down and get all the lines and get everything straight. But I'm noticing, well, I'm going to have to put filler on this anyway. But those interruptions on the 3D printer have actually left it a little worse for wear. So I'm just going to end up wiping this whole exterior. There's certain materials I like to use, and there's materials I just don't use. And just about anything Bondo brand, I don't use. I tend to use materials that are let's just say they're more of a professional quality, what would be used in a regular body shop where you have warranties that are supposed to last the lifetime of the car. I tend to use materials from that environment because you spend a lot of work doing something, you use crappy materials or cheap materials, in maybe a year or 6 months, or depending on how many temperature fluctuations, what you actually do with your prop, whether you actually take this and cosplay with it or you put it on a shelf. Sitting on a shelf can be just as detrimental to something you've created, especially something out of plastic, because you might, the temperature fluctuations, it might be where it's sitting, the furnace vent might hit it, and that's actually happened to me. I have a furnace vent right over to the left here, and there's a shelf right by it. It's like a parts shelf, and that whole area gets hot because it's in front or next to a big furnace vent. And I've had 3D prints get damaged because I sat them on there in the wintertime and didn't realize it. So what happens is the heating and contracting. So you want good materials that won't shrink and won't pop off during that contraction. And there are special materials made just for plastics. I'm going to use a spot putty right now, and I was never a fan of spot putties until I found this stuff. It's made by U-Pole. It's fantastic glaze and spot putty. Now here's a problem with this though. They don't make this anymore. This has been discontinued. I've had this tube for a little over probably 2 years. I keep it stored in a good place so it's still soft and malleable. It's been stored and kept properly. They have a new version of this out that's better, but this stuff's still pretty good. And what I like about it is it doesn't need a hardener. And how I found out about this is one of the painters I used to work with, he used this to fix minor body, like a pinhole in a body repair or rock chips on a hood or something like that. Because while he's prepping something, he would find something, he would just grab it, do it on with a razor blade, and then keep on going and come back when it's dry 5 or 10 minutes later and hit it with a little bit of sandpaper and then move on. It was the first time I ever seen anybody in a professional setting use spot putty. Spot putty is a no-no in that environment. But it turns out this stuff's actually pretty good. And I've been using it for 2 years. This is the only tube, but works really good. Now, I'll put a link in the description to the new version of this stuff. It goes a long way, as long as you keep it sealed and stored properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to swipe all the way around this thing. It's just a skim coat, but it's going to fill in the line, and it's also going to fill in those mess ups from the issues we had 3D printing, meaning the power going out and having to restart the print. Now, if you don't have a body spreader, and sometimes I actually use this instead of a spreader, is I'll use an old gift card. It actually, sometimes I can get a really smooth finish, better than what I could like this. Now, normally on something like this, I probably would use a catalyzed glaze putty. Since what I'm filling in is very minor, I think this will work just fine. There we go. Set that there. I'm going to set that off to the side, let that dry. Now, this thing here, one of the things that doesn't make this accurate, we already talked about this right here, the floor in these little parts here. But another thing is, on the original prop, see how here, the skirt, it just goes straight into the skirt and then into this body. On the original prop, it is about 1/8 of an inch, maybe, and maybe 1/4 of an inch. It's hard to really tell. But the body comes down and the skirt slides up on the body. And that's why we're making this like this. If you notice right here, see how much difference in height? When it's done, they're going to be the same height. The body is going to be sticking through the skirt, and we need to address the skirt. I'm going to do it before I sand and finish the skirt, and the reason why is it's just because I'm also going to sand and finish this. So let's get some of the heavy stuff out of the way, and then I can do the hand sanding on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Dremel, and I'm just going to go around this and remove this lip. By removing this lip, it's going to allow me to slide this up the body instead, because how it's designed now, you have a shorter body and it just sits on that perch right there. We're going to get rid of that and make it more like the original. The original slid up and was glued in place. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to remove that lip. All right, now I just think about this while I was doing that. I kept moving so I wouldn't generate too much heat. And I also came in at glancing my way in, and always going in a circle, never doing, you know, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the reason for that is, one, I wanted to control the heat. I'm still, you can see, it's coming off in chunks, so it's melting off just as fast as I'm sanding it. But I also don't want to dig a hole in there, so I'm not going to do this. I'm going to come in and swoop in and make circular attacks, or attack it circularly, so I can keep it nice and round and uniformed. Now I'm just going to finish it off with some hand sanding, and I'm also going to sand the outside. I might have to do a little bit of filler work, but I'm not really 100% sure. We'll know when we get there after we're done sanding. Now this stuff here is still a little bit soft, but it's going to get there. We'll start out with my 80 block, just like I did with the body, and start sanding. That's going to be a tight fit. And I'm just going to sand this until it fits just right. I want it snug. I want it somewhere between, it doesn't need glue, but it won't break when I slide it on. There we go. Ooh, see that? Slides on. It's just tight enough. There we go. Make sure I get all my 80 grit knocked down to 180. And this piece here is pretty much ready for primer. We'll start addressing all the greeblies here in a minute. Yeah, that's nice and smooth. And it fits. Check out how nice it fits. Look at that. That's nice, tight fit. And that's exactly what I want. That's a good fit. Let's feel this. So you can see how that right there, it's a little bit of a thicker area. Maybe definitely thicker than this material should be. And I think what it was the end of a swipe, and I left a little extra material. So, and that's right here. So where it gooped over onto the top. Actually, I'm going to remove that right now so I don't have to sand it in the future. This is going to need a little more time to dry because I accidentally made it. That stuff's not supposed to be very thick at all. All right, so probably out of all the greeblies, we're not going to be using this part. I don't know how well you can see inside there, but you can see there's 3 holes. This piece is supposed to be mounted down here with those 3 holes, and this is actually made to hold a switch. So you mount a switch and then put lights in it, which is also funny. The kits, obviously, they didn't, well, not really obvious. Lots of times they'll go ahead and provide a 3D rendering of the bulbs or the lights that go in this. They didn't do this, so we're going to be building these without lights. And I think before we get to the end, I don't know if I'll have sourced the lights yet, but the switch is a very simple click on, off, turn type switch. The lights that go in this are discontinued. They don't make this type of little bulb anymore. I could maybe make them. I've done it before. I made a similar light for a project, or a similar bulb. We didn't have one, so we made it out of clear resin and lit it from behind. It mimics the original bulb perfectly, but it's actually not. It's a piece of resin with light being projected into it. I might be able to do something like that for these 2 holes here. And we'll probably drill these holes out because there's not supposed to be a step in there from the original prop. So we'll probably drill all that out also and make it a clean hole. These 2 holes here should be drilled all the way out too, but they really don't matter because these guys go in there. These are the boot studs. These go in these holes. And once we get these sanded and primed, once they're ready to paint, we'll probably affix them before the final coat of paint. I think that's what we'll do. So anyway, I am going to first address the photodiode multiplier. Just clean up a little bit of artifact. Little 3D printing artifacts here. This is kind of a delicate piece. I'm going to kind of scrape these vents and clean them up. Well, I got these little bumps on these vents. I want to clean them up. It looks a little bit better. This one, a little bit. I don't know if the last print I did this. Now this is a delicate part, and one thing is this one is going to be, and I'm already thinking about it. While I'm doing this, I'm thinking about how I'm going to finish it as far as paint and the paint job, because there are a few things, like this piece right here. It's supposed to be shiny metal. Now, there's not very many good paints to do that. There's some okay stuff, like chrome paints and stuff like that, but they don't really look that good. While I was printing, and something that didn't come out, was there's 2 greeblies that are missing, and they go in these 2 holes here, here, and here, and those are the little knurled screws. They were small, and they just rat nested on the printer. So, but I do sometimes also make handmade parts, or parts that would be more accurate anyway if I just made them by hand. For example, those thumb screws, I could put it on the metal lathe and quickly knock out 2 of those screws for myself. Now, I'm using a file here, and I'm trying very delicately not to gouge the sides. The file is so good because if you're careful, it'll flatten these details beautifully. It just needs a little going over with sandpaper, or once you hit it with primer, it's pretty much ready to go. All the rest of these greeblies, they're just going to need a good hitting of sandpaper. These are the EQ knobs that they go up in here. So I'm just going to keep going right along with all these little greeblies, and when I get everything ready for primer, I'll come back and talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to prime these. All right. I'm almost done. This is the last piece. Now, I don't know if you noticed or not, but as I was sanding all these pieces, I was fitting them and making sure I could get them all to fit, including like pieces like the gear onto the dial and the little cap on top of the gear. Been sanding and fitting and making sure everything fits together the way it's supposed to. All right, so those are all ready to prime. We don't need this piece. We're throwing that piece away. This is ready to prime. This is all ready to prime. This is ready to prime. Only thing that's not ready to prime is the body. So I'm going to get to finish sanding this body down and getting it ready. All right. Need to do a little more putty. Got a few spots that are still low. I got to put a little bit of putty on those. And then after that, this thing looks like this is pretty much ready for primer. Just like everything else, it's ready for primer. I'm going to get this wiped real quick, and I'll probably start prepping all these parts for primer while this dries. All right, that is actually a lot of sanding. Now, everything's ready for primer, and I want to talk about primer real quick. In the future, I won't talk about this stuff that much, but this time out, I'm just feeling it as it goes. This is the primary sander I use down in the shop. It's called Slick Sand. Part number is 100-709. You can get it in quarts and gallons. They actually have a new version of this that came out about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago. That's 708. It's a low VOC version of this, so it's a little bit better for the environment, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the reason why I use Slick Sand is, one, it's a polyester-based catalyzed primer, meaning once you sand this stuff on and it hardens, it's never going to shrink. It's not going to do any weird things that your bomb can spray primers will use, like, the out of the rattle can primers. And this stuff is literally like liquid body filler. This stuff is so thick that you actually have to shake it up while it's in your paint gun to keep it from settling and clogging the gun. I mean, this is some mean stuff. It's the best stuff in the world for 3D prints. You could literally take one more like this and prime it with about 2 or 3 coats of primer and then sand all that down, and it'll build up enough to fill in all your layer lines. It's a really good primer. I'm not going to be using it tonight because I already have some other primer mixed up. So instead of letting that go to waste, I'll use that primer tonight. But this is primarily the best primer for 3D prints, hands down. And as far as other high build primers that are catalyzed primers, it's fairly inexpensive, although you have to shop and look for it. You should look for either 709. I think 709 always stays a little bit higher because it's the older and it's not as used as much. But if you can find 708, I've seen it anywhere from $160 a gallon all the way down to $60 a gallon. And you can also buy this in quarts. And I would recommend buying it in quarts. And another benefit is if you don't have a paint gun, this stuff is brushable. So you can take a brush and brush it on. And I've brushed it just as much as I've ever sprayed it. You can brush it on, let it dry. It dries fairly fast. I'd say about a half hour. You can come back to it and sand it. The best thing is it's not going to react with any spray paints or any weird stuff you put on top of it. It's stable. It's not going to shrink because it's a catalyzed. Once it's catalyzed, it's pretty much going to stay where it's at. It creates a great barrier between your 3D print, your body work, and a good surface to paint on. I can't say enough good things about this stuff. Also, if you can't find the slick sand, there are other polyester primers that are just like this out there. Just look for polyester high build primer, and you might find something that's a lot cheaper than this and works just as good. And I would say go ahead and use that. I might start, since slick sand's kind of getting a little bit iffy on pricing because you'll find $100 difference from one place to another. I might start looking for a more reliable source and a better price. As soon as this is out, I'll start looking for a new one. But until then, these polyester high build primers are where it's at. And you know what? To be honest, a lot of prop shops, they use the heck out of this stuff. If they're using it, there's a reason. And I think the reason is the quality, the price, and how fast it builds. Like most of the time, 2 to 3 coats would be all you need to get the job done. Most other primers, like your bomb can, your rattle can primers you'll get at the store, like the hardware store, it's probably going to take 2 or 3, not coats, but primings, like prime it, let it dry, sand it, reprime it, let it dry, sand it, prime it. And those primers don't even sand good. They're gummy, they clog up your paper. Stuff like this, even though it might be more expensive, over the long run, for as much value you get out of it and this primer goes a long way. And I think once you, say, buy a quart of this, you'll realize that you're actually saving money. If you do this type of stuff a lot, you'll be saving money as opposed to buying the rattle can primers. It's just, that's how much better and how much further it goes. And it's good stuff. But tonight, I already have some primer catalyzed or mixed. This is gray primer. We're going to be using a black primer tonight. So let's get to priming. And always prime in a well-ventilated area and use a respirator. I have an exhaust fan on right now, pulling air in and drawing air out. So as soon as I'm done priming, I can take this off and I'll be totally fine. But while I'm spraying, I'm going to be wearing a respirator. I'll let all this dry overnight, sand it down again, reprime it. I'll save you guys all the sanding and repriming. The next time you'll see all this stuff, it'll be sanded, reprimed, and ready to paint and assemble, and that's where the fun begins. Join me next time when we continue on with this project. And before I leave, since I'm doing this new and I don't really have a good vibe or feel for it, any comments, suggestions, if the sanding took too long, or you could do without the sanding, or tell me what you liked, tell me what you'd like to see, and if you think I should do a different angle on some of these things, or not really an angle, but any ideas, they'd be greatly appreciated, and thank you for following along, and see you next time.